Hey everyone! Today I will share a new watercolor set that the Paul Rubens PR team kindly sent me to try out. It's a 24 color Academy grade set, but it also includes two extra colors, ivory black and ultramarine, bringing it to a total of 26 color blocks. The set comes in a beautiful metal box with a handy ring on the back, making it easy to hold and great for travel. The set also includes a swatch sheet, which I found really helpful for identifying the colors, especially since the color blocks themselves don't have names or numbers. To make it more practical, I cut out the information from the wrappers and attached it to each block using double-sided tape. This way, I always have the color details handy even when I take the set on the go. This set is very affordable for its type, so I was curious to see how the colors perform. I know many of you asked me to demonstrate how to use watercolors in coloring books, so I thought this would be a perfect chance to test whether this set is a good option for beginners or anyone wanting to experiment with watercolors in their books. In this video, I'll show you how the colors work specifically in a coloring book. I plan to test them further on watercolor paper in future videos, but for now, let's see how they perform for this type of use. I chose Johanna Basford's glass jars from Rooms of Wonder because I feel it's a great practice piece for beginners. The small details make it easier to control the watercolors, while the option to paint the background allows those interested to expand the picture and experiment further. I'll start with an emerald background for the jar because I imagine it's surrounded by a magical bluish-green glow. However, the background shouldn't be too bold because it's a jar and I need to consider the darker background I'll add later. So I'll apply a light layer of emerald, keeping in mind the jar's round shape. For this coloring, I'm using round brushes because their pointed tips make it easy to navigate the small details. This one is a size 6. While I usually don't recommend the wet-on-wet technique for beginners, it works well for this type of small background. You can add extra color to areas that need more depth and let it blend naturally. Since the paper isn't ideal, it's important to work quickly because the color sets very fast. Make sure to use enough pigment. Less reworking is better for achieving a clean result. I'll add a touch of warmer green and brown to the foreground to create the ground. This will give the piece a nice balance as we'll be playing with both warm and cool colors in the coloring. The background isn't fully dry yet, but I can continue adding the details. It's important not to use colors that are too dark at the start. I work in layers, so if something turns out too light or vibrant, I can always tone it down. It's much harder to lighten or adjust colors that are too dark. Now let's start exploring the colors. Warm yellows, oranges, reds, and browns will stand out beautifully against the emerald background. Since the details are small, I can mix and experiment with the colors as I go. However, I'll still make sure to arrange the hues thoughtfully so that we don't have the same color next to each other. As you can see, I'm using the dry-on-dry technique for the details. I take a minimal amount of water, just enough to pick up the pigment and place it on the paper. Then I dilute the pigment with a clean brush. This method keeps the colors intense and vibrant, and it gives you good control over the watercolors. Even with small areas like this, it's important to maintain the highlighted lighter spots. Instead of just coloring the whole object, practice controlling where you want the highlights to stay. You can see that I often clean the brush and work with the pigment I've applied using the dry-on-dry technique, adjusting as I go. Some of the colors here are fairly opaque. When working on paintings, the transparency of watercolors is extremely important. However, in coloring books, I sometimes use opaque watercolors on purpose because they help cover or neutralize the black lines of the line art. So in this case, it's really not a negative thing. For example, I used flash color on the little lamps and it helped neutralize the lines, which is quite lovely if you're using just watercolor. Now that the details inside the jar are covered, I'll try to hide some of the black lines using a mix of gesso and watercolor. As you can see, there aren't many visible lines left, so I'm just adding a bit here and there where I think it's needed. The white gesso will make the color more opaque, but you can still go over it with watercolors if you need to make adjustments. It works really well, and I actually enjoy filling in those little details. You can clearly see that this watercoloring isn't perfect, but with such small details it really doesn't matter, and you can work fairly quickly. What's more important is where you place the highlights and shadows, leaving enough lighter areas. That's what really makes the watercoloring work in this situation. I also didn't initially think about where the light is coming from, but since there's magic involved, it doesn't really matter. At first I was painting as though the light was coming from the left side, but that doesn't quite work now since I might continue with the background and connect the picture. So I'll need to shift the light to come from the right. But again, it's all magic, everything can be adjusted. I actually really like how it looks like this without the background. If you're following along with this tutorial, you can absolutely leave it as is and move on to working on the other jars. However, the purpose of this video is to show you how I color in coloring books and how these paints behave. And to do that, I need to paint the background as well. This part is for the adventurous ones. Every time I start coloring the background, there's always an ugly stage, and that's completely normal for me. If you do this often, you'll know that this is the part where you just have to trust the process. I have a little experience with this, and I already know I have a plan B and even a plan C ready, so I'll just give it a go and see where it takes me. Let's blend the background first. The color should be dark so the jar stands out nicely. Since there are already details in the jar, I don't want to add too many details to the background. I'll try to leave some areas blurry. I decided to keep it simple with a natural environment theme, so I've added just a few leaves and a branch, not too detailed, but enough to work with. Since there is enough space, I'll use a larger round brush. The color should be applied boldly, so I'm going to start with a dark emerald. I'll mix in a bit of black to tone down the emerald's vibrancy, but it needs to be darker than what's in the jar. I'll avoid the areas with the branch and leaves for now, then add lighter greens and browns to those spots while the background is still wet, so they blend together. This will create some lovely new colors and give a nice blurry effect. Don't forget that the colors will tone down once they're dry, so keep that in mind as you apply them. The foreground will feature warmer colors, but I'll mix in a bit of emerald towards the back. As I spread the colors, I might shape a few leaves more with a clean brush and see what shapes emerge once the background dries. Try to create as many good shapes as possible in this first layer before the color starts drying. After that, just leave it to dry completely and we'll see what we're working with. Now that everything is dry, we can add the second layer and start adding more details, working with the shapes we see. This means we'll focus on hiding parts we don't like and highlighting the areas we want to emphasize, painting the leaves and adding the final touches. It doesn't have to be perfect though. I know I can make some adjustments later with color pencil if needed. The goal here is to show the full watercolor process. But as always, this doesn't have to be the final result. Since I'll be continuing with the rest of the page, I can make further adjustments here as needed. For now, we'll leave it as it is. So, my final conclusion about the Paul Rubens watercolor set. After painting only with these, I can honestly say they behave similarly to the ones I've already used for my coloring books. I actually think they're quite nice to work with here. Of course, I still need to test them with actual paintings on watercolor paper to see the real difference, but I can definitely recommend them for use in coloring books, journals, and sketchbooks. The colors are diverse and mix beautifully. I especially like the transparency of the oranges, reds, and browns, and I can definitely say I'll continue using them. They're very practical and quite nice for beginners, especially considering the price. If you're looking to try watercoloring in your coloring books, this set is absolutely one to consider. I've included all the details on where to find them in the description. If you've tried this set or have experience with it, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this tutorial, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more similar videos. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you soon.